Oliver, Fuselier, the managing partner at Great Guns USA. And this is Addison Capper, who's the North American editor for Little Black Book. So it's great to have you guys. This is kind of the maiden voyage of the Little Black Book Great Guns series called 5 and 30, Anything But Advertising. And the reason was because I wanted to kind of talk to the leaders that were really in the day-to-day of advertising, running, agencies and brands that really kind of affected, the day-to-day runnings of producing content. I wanted to know a little bit about you. I think everybody does. I think they want to find a little bit of a personal kind of connection. With that, I'm going to introduce our guest today. So the first guest is Melany Esfeld. She's the Senior VP, Head of Production at Barkley in Kansas City, Missouri. I want to welcome you. Next guest is Tanya, Lesieur, who's the Head of Production, Associate Partner at MUH-TAY-ZIK, HOF-FER in San Francisco, California. Welcome, Tanya. And then last but not least, we have Brian Cooper. He's the Director of Production at Havas, the Annex and the Annex Bookstore in Chicago, Illinois. I want to welcome you, Brian. The use of words is more important than ever in a world where we've had to kind of live isolated at home and on screens. So the question is, what is the most profound use of words that you've heard or that you or someone else has used that stood out to you in the past year?
In the last 8 months or so, a whole different kind of anxiety has developed. It's just the way we have to deal with the world right now. We have become dependent on all new forms of texting, whether we're chatting in our Zooms or our Teams or just on our phones. And there's this horrible trend of conversations ending abruptly or not ending. You lose the human interaction where someone says, oh, I've got to go over there, or, oh, my phone rang. People just disappear. It took me months to realize that this knot that was in my chest every night was because I had as many as 40 conversations that did not finish. Wow. And what's been remarkable is the way that people have come up with an entire new form of language or a coding structure. Like I have emojis that I use, like a little monkey that goes like this, that quite literally just says, I hear you, I understand what you're saying, I have to do something else. And it's just that little note that says, we're still connected, but I have to handle something else. And then you're not left hanging. The way that people have got to find new ways to communicate with each other in order to create work that can have a deep human meaning and connect with a consumer is fascinating. It's so much harder.
That's fascinating. Is there one word that stands out that came out of COVID in the past 8 or 9 months that everybody used?
Oh God, just anxiety.
Yeah.
That's it.
I'm going to go to Tanya. Same question for you.
Amanda Gorman just blew me out of the water. I had the news on my right screen. I had a Zoom on another screen, and I'm trying to watch the inauguration. I'm trying to work, and it just really stopped me. And her words just stopped a nation. And how incredible is that? Which makes me think, okay, I'm no poet laureate, but how can I be more meaningful in the way I communicate on a daily basis? And then it kind of starts to trickle of how can I be kind and how can I be understanding? Because we are living in such strange times. And, the best thing that we can do for each other is really consider how we talk to each other and give each other a little bit of a break.
Well said. I love that. I love all the sentiments of that. I think it's really important to really think about words, even more so now in a time where we're so intimate with each other. So Melany, what about you?
Part of living in these boxes has, I think, brought a sense of humanity and brought everyone to a similar level, whether you're the CEO or a junior producer. And it brought people into each other's lives in ways this industry never probably would have done before, to see people's kids and understand what their day-to-day is and maybe why are they anxious because they have 4 toddlers in the other room who are coloring on their wall. But about halfway through the summer, I stopped setting up Zooms and would just pick up the phone and call people. And people were floored. Like, my phone is ringing. Why don't I have to be on this video with you? You know, why are you out walking your dog and calling me? And, you know, I think we all learn to adapt, and this is like the new normal, but like making a phone call is so normal and felt so normal in such a chaotic time. I think that we take for granted the simple ways we used to communicate and now feel like it has to be this. Yes, there is a different connection here, but sometimes I think we have to take a step back and say, well, we did it that way before. And there was something special about that maybe we didn't know at the time was special. I do think that we have kind of been led that we always have to be on video all the time, nonstop, one-on-one. And I personally feel like you got to find a balance of that, given where we are a year in, and probably, dare I say it, maybe another year. I just feel like it brings a sense of connection where it's like, yeah, I can walk around. I can go fill up my coffee and talk to my coworker and have a conversation and maybe walk my dog. And like, maybe you get to the resolution and the solve faster because you get to find a sense of freedom and normalcy that you had in our previous world of not being on Zoom all day.
I just want to build on that, because as a leader, one of the things that I've struggled with, because I'm the guy that just would constantly walk around. I probably walk 10 miles a day in the office, going and checking in and talking to everyone and having this sense of human intimacy, just talking. And that transitioned into these weird Zoom team meetings to try and interact with everyone. And I hated it. And it was so impersonal, and I could see the people yawning or looking off or texting or whatever. And someone pointed out, it may have been even yesterday, that, hey, we haven't had a big team meeting or a happy hour in a long time. And I said, well, you're okay with that? And they're like, well, I'm fine with it because you call me and we have one-on-ones. It didn't even occur to me that I had transitioned to what you were talking about, where I just said, I can't do this anymore. I have to speak to someone and give them the time so they can tell me how they're feeling and not worry about all these other faces on a screen.
We kind of have to take a step back and say, what works for everyone maybe doesn't work for everyone, and solve it differently and use different forms of communication that when we came into the pandemic didn't seem appropriate. Maybe not appropriate, just maybe not the norm, you know? And to me, a phone call is so valuable, and it feels so analog, but like so special in its own way.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, people, I do call, I pick up the phone and I do call people and they call it old school. I'm like, what? Like, this is so much better. I agree. Being a leader of a large agency, like, doesn't that take a lot of time? And how do you schedule it, or how do you deal with that? I would ask each one of you, like, I'll give you a minute to answer.
You've got a question that I'm sure you're going to come to about work-life balance. I will tell you that I have consciously sort of sacrificed the work-life balance in order to give the people the time that they need. I will pay a price for it eventually. But the bottom line is, putting that kind of positive energy into the world through your team, through your group, is going to come back to you amplified. That's just a belief that goes back to the way that my mother raised me. But it does take a tremendous amount of time.
I love that. Tanya, what about you? A minute.
You know, when we were in real life, we would laugh. We would have a moment where it wasn't just like 9:01 the meeting starts and there. And maybe there might be a perfunctory, did everybody have a good weekend? And then everybody jams into it. And here you can fall into that trap of, I'm in back to back. And, you know, I make a point that to bring up something completely unrelated to what the topic is, and not to kind of veer us off course, but really be personal and be real and encourage my team to either one-on-one and also as a group to say, you know what, this week COVID's been really hard for me, and have sort of a group conversation where we're really quite vulnerable. It's important to take care of each other.
I love it. Well, for time's sake, I'm going to move on. So looking back over the past 7 or 8 months of the pandemic, have you been inspired to feed like a passion? And if so, have you moved on it? What is it? Or have you helped somebody else be inspired to fulfill one of their passions?
I've always loved interior design. It is wildly out of control at this moment. Wallpaper, shiplap, endless projects, painting doors black, repainting things, all the way down to like,
we're just lighting fixtures.
Yeah, exactly. Lighting years. And that to me has kind of fueled some inspiration during a crazy time. Obviously you sit at home every day and you like walk to your kitchen, you're like, ooh, I could do something really cool there. Like, what if we swap that light?
Well, I have to say, I mean, this picture of you, it's perfect. It could be on the cover of a magazine.
I can't take credit, but grateful for following good Instagram accounts.
Oh my God. I'm going to go with you, Brian. What about you?
I've always had a lot of side hustles. I'm a photographer, commercial photographer, and I've always found a way to do that and weave that into my everyday life. Sometimes I have the privilege of doing it for the agency.
Wow.
But during all of this craziness, a dear friend of mine, someone who I consider a muse, basically said, go pick up your camera. I haven't seen anything from you in months. And she said, but go work with someone who you've wanted to work with and just do it for you. Don't do it because it's a client thing. And I went and photographed a friend of mine who's a dancer and her husband who is a DJ. And that led to someone reaching out saying, hey, I love that picture that you took of Caitlin. And I said, well, I'd love to take a picture of you. She's a singer. She's got an album coming out. And it reminded me that I was sort of living something that my mom had taught me years ago, this idea of an artist and their golden thread that connects people together. And I will do everything I need to do for my agency and for my team, but then I'm going to extend it out in, and I'm going to pick up the camera. I'm going to seek people out and photograph them, socially distant, of course, give them that gift and then see what comes back and follow it wherever I can go. And I'm tracking every single connection along the way. In one of the darkest moments probably of my life, it has spun so quickly into one of the most positive experiences.
Yeah, that's inspiring. I mean, truly. I mean, look, I think there's different ways to be inspired, and that's truly one. Those things will affect the people that are around you and people that you don't know that you have affected until further down the path. So, Tanya, what about you?
Whether it's exercise, whether it's cooking, whether it's a floral thing, like trying to get out of our head just a little bit during, like, it just makes it so much better. And what I've started to also to do is also doing sort of small meditations in the morning and at night. And I am not a person, like, we're talking 3 to 7 minutes, we're not talking 30 minutes, but it's for me, it's been so grounding. So just trying to find comfort in the things, the everyday things that now become even more special. I mean, I haven't done anything, as trite as like make, a sourdough bread and all of that, but like all the power to you guys if that's what you want to do.
Let's go to the next question, number 3. So in the city where you live, outside of advertising, what inspires you? Where and how does your city sing? You have something, Addison. I think you did.
I mean, my very basic answer to this is like an example was I got a puppy. So I spend a lot more time speaking to my neighbors who also have dogs, because now we stand in the street and talk about dogs, basically, which I never did before. I would walk past them in the street and ignore them. So that's my COVID community story, basically.
I love it. You be the sneering guy going, pick up your dog's mess, okay?
Yeah.
I love that. Melany, let's go back to you. Let's start with you. What makes your city sing?
Well, I live in Denver and work out of our Colorado office. We're big mountain people, always have been. So we spend a lot of time up in the mountains at a cabin. We actually spent the first 6 weeks, like, the world went, and we're like, well, we're packing up and we're leaving. We spent 6 weeks up there with a 3 and a 5-year-old in a 1,200 square foot cabin. Which, now sounds insane. But I will say, probably the best memory I've had with my children, uninterrupted, aside from the chaos of work. And so for us, it's being outside. I mean, Denver is obviously an amazing city too, but any chance we get to spend time in the fresh mountain air of the Rocky Mountains is where we go.
I love that. I think there's a lot of people that really experienced that and took advantage of it, and how fortunate. Tanya, I'm going to go in order of what I see on the screen. Why don't you take this one?
Sure. I live over the Golden Gate Bridge in Marin, and I'm very fortunate. I live on a channel, and the water is something that's really important to me. And I'm right there with you, Melany, in terms of walking, hiking. I mean, it's so crazy. Just like hearing birds. And I mean, it's a good day when I see a hummingbird. I'm not kidding you. Like, it is definitely, I'm like, it's going to be a good day. I just saw a hummingbird. You know, for all the terrible negative things that have happened, COVID has somehow also exposed some, like, how do we be at peace with ourselves? How do we appreciate something a little bit? Because those moments make me sing. I mean, you know, when I'm on the bay and, you know, then there's a pelican and there's a crane and you're just like, what? This is where I live? I mean, so I don't know. That's been, for me, has been just an amazing part of the downside of what we've, you know, being sequestered, but on the other side, a very upside. So
I love it. Brian, what makes your city sing?
I have discovered people and places within my city that, quite frankly, I didn't know existed. And not to bring it back to my photography, I was renting studio space left and right to do portraits of people. And then I discovered a cooperative studio that I'm now a member of. It is such a diverse group of people from the south side of Chicago, from the North Shore of Chicago, from the western suburbs, all different kinds of people that are constantly interacting and crossing paths, even during this insanity and being, you know, safe about it. I'm just meeting the most incredible people during the most trying of times.
This is the next one. Most of us are still working from home for like the past year. How has that affected your work-life balance, or has it affected it at all?
I mean, I used to drive 35, 40 minutes every day to and from. I get up, I take my kids to school now. I am home and working by 8. On New Year's, I was actually, or I guess it was Thanksgiving, talking to my husband, and he was like, I just hadn't thought about it, but you've been home like a really long time. And he meant it in a nice way, but like, you know, we kind of were doing it. And I actually went back and like on my Instagram, I posted on New Year's, like, I am so grateful that I have woken up. I put my children to bed 293 nights. That never has happened in their entire life. And like, I kind of sat there and got super teary-eyed about it because it felt like so small for a lot of people who don't travel. But I was like, every morning I get to get up and they get to run into our room. And like, it's something so small, but yet so special that, yeah, the work-life balance is hard. Yes, there's pros to being home. Yes, there's cons to being home as well. That has been a huge blessing that I will always be grateful for.
I love that. I got to tell you, that made me tear up because it does remind me of the good old days. You know, I mean, I think that this is going to be a time in our lives and the time in your children's lives that we're going to look back and go, my God, it was something that is never going to be experienced again unless we continue. You know, we continue to put forth, as Brian said, let's see how this moves forward after the pandemic, you know, and what do we adopt? What do we keep? What do we throw away? With that, I'm going to ask Tanya.
You know, I will say that we, you know, our world, our industry, our business is about creativity and reinvention. And I think we've proved to ourselves that we don't always have to be in the same place at the same time. And there are times where not physically being there is a challenge, and sometimes being remote works completely fine. So, you know, and being able to give people, you know, more of the opportunities to be with their loved ones, with their friends and their family. I mean, I don't, you know, I get back an hour and a half of my day by not commuting, and, you know, and I'm using that to connect with my sisters and my you know, my family's all over the country, and my friends are all over the country. So, you know, I've been trying to use that time to, you know, for me and for, you know, to give myself balance. And you can give yourself permission to go, okay, I need to run this errand, but I'm going to work a little bit later because that's how that's going to work.
It's a strange world we're living in, but this really kind of like normalizes it for me. So Brian, what about you?
I'm here in my workstation that has 6 screens up, you know, every day, sometimes 16, 17 hours a day. And that's hard, but my daughter generally is right over there doing her schoolwork. And if something comes up, it's just, and we can interact. My wife would be right over there if she wasn't at her job right now. And what we're able to do just through the course of the day is so satisfying. That was impossible for 25 years. I look back on a job that I did when I was at the Martin agency, where I packed a bag for a 3-day trip to check in on a team, and I came back 65 days later because of what happened on the job and the effect that it had on my family. And I compare that work-life balance problem to this one, and I realize how lucky I am. Leadership is doing everything they can to try and find ways to bring meaning and balance into the lives of employees, to try and bring meaning and purpose into people's lives so that they're taking care of themselves first, allows them to then bring meaning and purpose into the work that we do. And that's so incredibly important to the agency. And I've really come to appreciate the fact that leadership will actually go out of their way and just sort of pull the emergency brake and say, hey man, slow down. It's okay. Like, it's only advertising. Slow down.
Wow, that's great. I mean, you just said something that's really interesting to me. You said, hey, it's only advertising. But for the first time, I think in my career, I have seen nothing but human-centered, human-focused, caring advertising that has come out of some of the most creative places ever. I, as a production person, kudos to you guys for creating such amazing content that makes us feel and come together and really kind of appreciate being part of it. So I can say thank you guys for that.
The best work in the world is work that can find a human truth or have meaning of some kind, even in the simplest way.
I think you nailed it. Like, I think that is such an important piece of the emotional pie of how do we bring purpose in our everyday and with our day-to-day clients, and then how can we give back and do good? All of us sitting here in the Zoom and everybody else watching, we all have the opportunity and the connections to make a difference. And it doesn't have to be a huge production. It can be an email blast.
We're here to help people through their lives. I think so often, people are like, yeah, it's just advertising. It's just a spot or whatever. And it's like, I take pride in hoping that the people I touch across, my team or within my agency or the production world take something away from me that makes them better as well. And I think that that's a huge part of being a leader at an agency is finding meaning bigger than just the physical craft. It's also the craft of helping develop great human beings.
Oh, I love that. I really do. That is amazing. Well said, all three of you. It's brilliant. It's an inspiration for me, for sure, and everybody that's going to listen to this. Creative inspiration is hard to come by with, many social and cultural experiences out of bounds these days, I should say. What have you been following, reading, watching? What is like your guilty pleasure over these past 9, 8, 10, 11 months? Let's go with Brian.
I discovered BritBox, which basically is a feed of all the great British dramas and comedies and whatnot. And so to have discovered things like River, Broadchurch, any number of shows, and just to lose myself in a different way of storytelling.
So important.
It's just incredible. And that's been such a pleasure. That is a guilty pleasure.
I love it. What about you, Melany?
I have always had an obsession with A-frame cabins. I've spent a lot of time deep researching what types are there, how do you build them, the physical aspect, I think, of building it versus, obviously we build things every day, but in more of a virtual space. I guess for me, the end goal would be to have an A-frame cabin on a river. And I'm taking my time and finding inspiration on how I can actually achieve that.
I think Melany's going to build an A-frame Airbnb empire. I'm going to come out and see it. And Tanya will come out and cook for all of us and lead us on bird watching.
Sounds perfect.
And you'll take pictures of it and
document it along the way.
You'll document it. I love it. Tanya, what about you?
My guilty pleasure has been it's music. Actually, it's one of my favorite podcasts right now is Switched on Pop from Vox. a couple of weeks ago, they went through history of female rappers. They deconstruct sort of, George Michael, Wham's, that Christmas song that he wrote. And I actually don't start my day with video, and I don't end my day with video. I like music because for me, it creates sort of an open space. And one of my guilty pleasures is, DJs like D Nice. I mean, and then friends, just, you go on Instagram and Twitch and people are spinning at all hours. I mean, for me, that's been sort of a guilt. I shouldn't even call it a guilty pleasure. It's like,
no, you shouldn't feel guilty.
I love it. Like, I'm not afraid. It's one thing for, that I'm doing for me that makes me feel good,
Addison, I think you have a little bit of a guilty pleasure that you might want to.
I mean, I've got a lot of guilty pleasures, but honestly, just when we asked this question, the thing that popped in my head was I've just been binging a show called World's Most Extraordinary Houses, basically. I
feel like I need to watch that show. I'm going to write it down.
So with that, one last question, and I want to thank you guys for being so amazing and inspiring. What lasting impact has the experience of the pandemic had on you and your agency on how you think about and approach production?
We are an inventive bunch, particularly producers, right? We improvise, adapt, and survive. Our mission isn't just to facilitate the creation of work, it's to add value to it and even potentially take it places that the teams that conceived of the idea didn't think possible. To do that under the conditions that we're doing it today is incredibly difficult. There is a spirit of inventiveness that is just incredible. Like discovering different ways to remotely supervise a production. And I have loved that the people on my team have all come up with new and innovative solutions on their own and then shared it. It's just so inspiring, right? They're not waiting for someone to give them an answer. They're figuring it out on their own. Uses of technology, just it's mind blowing. So that has made a lasting impression on me, like how people adapt.
What about you, Tanya?
It's incredibly hard in that you want people to be working, but we also need to be responsible. And it's irresponsible for clients and us to force things. Now, with that said, there is a practical nature that things have to get done, and people sometimes have to be in person, and doing that responsibly and ethically and as a shared responsibility. And I mean, I don't mean to bring it down, but like it is a life and death conversation, and I don't want to be responsible for that. So let's then think, okay, how can we hand off, and how more inventive can we get? That would be my kind of thing as an industry. Let's continue to think about the impact that we have, make smart choices. And then if we are going to be together, following safe set protocols and making the best of a situation and making the best work ever. So
I love that. Thank you. What about you, Melany?
For me, yes, we can produce virtual. Yes, it is very difficult. Yes, it is less than ideal. Yes, sometimes it's probably not going to be as crafted as we would love. That's not an excuse. I think there are just real hurdles to being in the virtual space. I also think a lasting impact is clients will probably in the future be more willing to look at all the different avenues versus we're just going to go to LA. Yeah. And, we've shot in 5 different countries that we hadn't shot in before. And part of that is just the nature of how we solved it during the constraints we had. In normal times, would that have happened? I don't know. But I do think it opens, no pun intended, a whole world of opportunity going forward. Who's the right director? Where is the talent? Can we spread the money differently? Do we all have to fly to New Zealand to shoot this job? No. Maybe 3 people go instead of 14 or what, like that's excessive, but you hear what I'm saying. There's a lot of good that has come from this. There's also a lot of challenges. But I think ultimately it does prove, if we're creative, we can solve anything that's handed in our lap.
I love that you just said that, because it's something that John Norman, our CCO, it's like this little speech he gives all the time: creativity is the remedy. And it's never been more important than it is now. And to know that, that's sort of the lifeblood of the way that you operate your organization. Tanya, you've expressed that. I mean, that, Oliver, I don't want to do your job and sum this up, but that's it. Creativity is the remedy.
Well said.
Everything we do.
What do we do and how do we make this, how do we make the fire from what we have here in this room? And I think that's what you each have kind of said. And I love that kind of sentiment, because I think it's important, and it's gotten us to a point where we can stop, we can appreciate our lives, we can appreciate our work, we can appreciate the people around us.
I mean, I appreciate all of us getting on and like talking through this. It is really nice to hear what other agencies are going through and living and breathing, especially this far into it. I think with probably a little ways to go still. We're all humans, and I think we found a lot of humanity in this experience in an industry that requires you to almost always be on point, always. For me, that's probably been one of the silver linings in this whole thing is I can look at my coworkers, and they're not just my coworkers. They're part of my life. And I now get to see a large part of their life I never saw before. And I think that ultimately bonds us in a way we never had, that will be reflected in the work going forward.
Feels like the past year, every day there was something new that we all were looking at and dealing with, whether culturally, what was happening, in our political environments, with our clients, with whoever, just every day there was a new challenge. And I really continue to look forward how we all look at things and solve things, and then do things like this where we get to communicate and share and have more dialogue like this, because that's how we make ourselves better, is by talking and learning with one another. And that's the best part of what we do, is that every day I learn something new. So
I think what this whole experience, including this right here, has taught me is that we really are social creatures. The human interaction is so important. And yes, we've come up with new innovative ways to interact with each other, but finding a way to interact at a personal level with a friend, a coworker, a client, is just so incredibly important. And then I think the last thing that this experience and just this whole year has taught me is that now more than ever, you still have to create your own opportunities. You can't wait for it to land in your lap. You've got to put in the extra effort to seek out those people, the interests, the technology, the ways to learn. And you have to be okay asking for help in order to do it. Because if you're not creating your own opportunities, then the world's going to pass you by.
Well said, all three of you, really amazing. I am so grateful that I got to hear you guys speak and talk. This has been really amazing and eye-opening for me, and it's opened my heart. And I just thank you guys. As a person coming from production, we really admire and love and are inspired and motivated by you guys. And we feel like we're all a part of a team. So thank you guys. Have a good one.
Bye. Have a great day.
Bye.